morning. Today is Friday, the 26th of Iyar, Tovshin Pei Beis. We are in Teres Menachem Sefer HaMamorim Tovshin Yud Beis, in the first Maimer on page Vov, someplace in the middle of chapter 3, Ois Gimel. I guess we're up to V'Yisera Mizeh. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 lines from the beginning of the chapter, from Ois Gimel.
I think we're actually 2 lines before that.
No, we've done that already.
Eina.
So the line starts Rak, and it's V'Yisera Mizeh. Remember, we already said the Yiddish words here. So the point that Rebbe is making here, we're discussing this for a few shurim already now, is that the retraction on Rosh Hashanah is not only insofar as the supernal attribute of Malchus itself is concerned, but it's also the fullness of what is behind it that retracts. Everything retracts. What is the motivation for kingship? Desire and pleasure. Rotzen and Tainug. Right? Without wanting to be a king, you have to want to be a king, right? In the Spheres, Rotzen and Tainug is, I guess, a reference to Keser, which is beyond the 10 divine attributes, right? But be that as it may, the point that Rebbe is making is that all of it retracts. Not just the actual functional aspect of it, Malchus, the actual kingship itself, but everything that's behind it retracts this original source. In what way? In a manner of siluk, in a manner of removal. Like the Tzimtzum Rishon, like the first contraction, we discussed the difference between Tzimtzum b'bchinas siluk and Tzimtzum b'bchinas miut. There are retractions that are in a mode of reduction, right? So when you go from one level to the next level, one level to a lower level, there is a form of retraction, especially when you go from one realm to another realm, right? But those retractions are b'bchinas miut. They reduce down the energies, the divine lights and energies, so that they become fit for purpose in the lower realm. It shouldn't overwhelm the lower levels and the lower realms. Whereas the first retraction, as I mentioned from the writings of the Arizal, where the Hashem's Ein Sof, Hashem's infinite light, filled the entire hollow, and he sort of moved his Ein Sof, metaphorically speaking, to the sides and left a hollow, left a void without the Ein Sof, right? That's the retraction. That's known as Tzimtzum Rishon, the first retraction, the first constriction. In what manner did the Ein Sof, was the Ein Sof removed during the Tzimtzum Rishon, the first retraction? In a manner of siluk, full removal. Right? Siluk. Removal. Which means it's not there. Not that it's there, but it's concealed, or it's there in a reduced form. No, it's gone, basically. In what way? So what is left? What happens to the Ein Sof that's removed? It is present within the essence of Hashem as a potential to be projected. Then we went on to say it's even more than that. Not only is it not in the mode of existent light energy, not only is it not present in a manner, not only isn't it the existence of divine energy, but only potential, as it is included and subsumed within the luminary. It's even more than that. That's where we had that long discussion at the end of the Shiur. What's actually present then, what's extant, is the luminary himself. So what relevance does it have to the Eir, the retracted Eir? In that state, at that state, the luminary is present. What is the luminary? Hashem, in this context. He includes everything, including also what? The ability to project the Ein Sof. In this sense, the Eir, the divine energy, this Ein Sof, which is now subsumed in the luminary, is not obvious and is not discernible, even potentially, even as a potential. We had this long discussion about the difference between the difference in the Ein Sof before it's projected altogether versus the Ein Sof having been projected and then retracted. In both cases, it's not present in the hollow and the void, so to speak. But in the first instance, it was never there. So in what way is it present within the luminary? You can't also say, 1 second, there must be his ability. It doesn't even come into for discussion at all. If you think about it, and so on and so forth, etc., you'll say the luminary Hashem includes everything, so he must have the ability to project this, but it's not discernible. Whereas once it was present and then retracted, even though it's not present in the hollow and the void, so to speak, he's not projecting himself, it's retracted back into the essence, you can say, okay, there is a potential. What the Rebbe is stressing here is that the retraction is such as if it was never there before, altogether. So in other words, he's emphasizing that it's total removal. It's not complete non-existence, because the luminary has the ability to, includes everything, including the ability to project. But insofar as the Eid is concerned, it's basically non-existent. As far as this projection is concerned, it's non-existent in actual fact, it's not existent in potential. It's not even existent in being notionally, being able to start thinking, is it there or isn't it there? It doesn't come for discussion at all. So if that's the case, what happens if Malchus is the function through which Hashem creates, and you say it all retracts back as if it is complete, now back to the luminary, back into Hashem's very essence? How does the world exist? From Rosh Hashanah Eve until after the blowing of the shofar, the world should cease to exist. Says the Rebbe, Omnam siluk zehu rak b'pnimis Malchus. This retraction is only in the inner dimension of Malchus, of kingship, including the entire spectrum, what is behind Malchus, the Rotzen, the Tainug, etc. So all of it is removed. But which aspect of Malchus? Only the inner dimension of Malchus. But the exterior aspect of Malchus remains permanently present, and does not retract. What does it mean? Pnimius and Chitzonius? The inner dimension of Malchus, the exterior dimension of Malchus. Imagine, I was going to bring some examples later on, like a person that's asleep. What's the difference between a sleeping person and a person that's awake? Both people are alive, right? But the pnimi, when the person is awake, his pnimius,
his consciousness is fully awake.
His consciousness
when he sleeps, the consciousness is still there, but it's not as active.
It's the consciousness is not there. He's not conscious. That's exactly the point. So in other words, what's the difference between a conscious person and
but not active?
It means it's behelim. It means it's concealed. It's retracted. That's exactly the point. That means retraction. It's, in other words, what remains in the person while he sleeps is still connected to the life force. Otherwise, the person would die. God forbid. Yeah. That's death, right? But there are stages. There's sleep. There's coma. There's, God forbid, death, right? But what's the difference when a person is asleep? What happens? Whatever is in the person's body that gives that person just that minimum of life that's necessary for sleep and non-functionality of anything else, is still connected to its life force. Where's the life force? The conscious life force, the animating life force, the pnimius.
That's a good example.
It retracts. It goes wherever it goes. According to the Torah, it goes back up to its source and it rejuvenates. It regains its life and energy. So that's the difference between pnimius and chesenis. That's a metaphor for pnimius and chesenis. So what's retracted on Rosh Hashanah? The pnimius of Malchus and the fullness of the pnimius of everything that stands behind Malchus.
The inner part.
Correct, but the exterior part remains.
The outer part remains.
The outer part remains. With this we will understand the answer to the question. How could there be existence to the worlds on Rosh Hashanah, meaning from Rosh Hashanah Eve until after the blowing of the shofar, when we draw everything back down anew? What's the problem? Being that the existence of the world is through the supernal attribute of Malchus, of kingship, and the Rosh Hashanah Malchus is removed, is retracted in the manner that Rebbe so eloquently just described, that it's total retraction. Im Kain, if that's the case, how is it? How the worlds exist on Rosh Hashanah? From Rosh Hashanah Eve until when? Until after the blowing of the shofar. The answer is, says the Rebbe, the retraction is merely is only, I wouldn't say merely, only in the inner dimension of Malchus. But not the exterior dimension of Malchus, as just explained in the metaphor of sleep. What does that mean, the exterior and the interior? The Rebbe starts fleshing it out here. The verse states, Bidvar Havaya Shamayim Nasu. The heavens were made, meaning to say creation was formed, was fashioned, was made through the words of Hashem. Speech, words of Hashem. As we know, it says in Genesis, in Bereshis, Vayomer Elokim yehi oyer, and Hashem said, let there be light. And Hashem said, let there be this. And Hashem said, let the earth bring forth a carpet of grass, and so on and so forth. So creation came through words. The creation and the existence, the establishment, the continued existence of the worlds is through the letters of speech. What does it mean, letters of speech? It's not just the letters themselves, but within those letters of speech. By the way, letters and speech is another euphemism in Chassidus and Kabbalah for Malchus. Asher bidvar melech shilton. How does a king rule? He gives decrees and so on and so forth. So speech is related to Malchus. In these letters of speech, what clothes itself into the letters of speech are the emotional divine attributes and the intellectual divine attributes, meaning the 10 spheres, the 10 supernal attributes of Atzilus, right? Clothe themselves in the letters of speech, ad b'chinas hakeser, all the way up to the supernal divine attribute, which is beyond the 10, which is the divine attribute of Keser, the crown, as mentioned. That's the transcendent, that's on top of all the 10 divine attributes, Keser. And it has 2 dimensions, the inner dimension, the outer dimension, right? That is the transcendent divine energy that ultimately finds its way into the 10 spheres. So Keser, the crown, so all of that is the inner dimension of these letters. So what are the letters? The letters are letters. What are letters? You can do anything with letters. On their own, they're dry, right? What clothes itself in the letters? What does it mean Hashem speaks? Hashem, the letters, the way the letters are formed and articulated, are organized, represents the different energies that clothe themselves in those letters. Which aspects of the emotional divine attributes, which aspects of the intellectual divine attributes. And that's the energy, that's how the energy comes into every creature and creation in the world. So Vasiluk Rosh Hashanah Hurak Ba'apnimius. The retraction and the removal of Rosh Hashanah is only in the inner dimension Shala'esis of the letters. Sheheim, what does that mean? Hasfiris HaMislapshim Ba'Esis. The supernal attributes that clothe themselves in these letters, as just explained, they remove themselves from the letters. Avalachetzenis, but the exterior of the energies, which is what? Avalachetzenis, Sheheim Ha'Esis Atzman, the letters themselves, Nishar Kayim Beinim Istalik, they remain present and they're not retracted, they're not removed. That's how the world exists from the eve of Rosh Hashanah until after blowing of the shofar.
So please repeat. So I'm trying to understand. I want to totally understand. So when you say that, coming back to the letters, so the letters form every physical object that's in this world. So explain to me what retracts and what remains.
The letters contain within them energy. Not only, first of all, the letters themselves exist. If the letters themselves exist, it means they have an energy of their own.
Right.
Under normal circumstances, within those letters are contained the divine attributes of Hashem in accordance with the particular formation of a certain word. Yeah. Shor. Shin Vav Reish represents letters that draw certain elements from the 10 divine attributes.
Dog or cat, whatever.
Correct. So that's the normal situation. What happens on Rosh Hashanah is that is retracted. The spheres are retracted. The inner part, the spheres, the attributes, the oir is retracted from the Isis.
But the letters
remain.
The letters remain. So otherwise, these objects would
disappear. But in what way does it remain? In a very reduced form. This retraction of the inner dimension is called durmita, sleep. The world is basically asleep from the eve of Rosh Hashanah until after Tkiyas. Now we don't see it, obviously. Why? In fact, there's a story told that there was once a chassid walking with Reb Levi Yitzchak Shneas, and the Rebbe's father in Dnepropetrovsk on Rosh Hashanah night, and they were talking about this particular point, that the world is asleep. He says to me, this chassid said to Reb Levi, he says, to me the world looks the same. He said, what are you talking about? Look at the Dnieper, the river. Don't you see that it's flowing differently today than it's flowing everywhere? Now, for somebody like Reb Levi Yitzchak Shneas, who went in the normal course of things, we see the world in its superficial manner the entire year. So far as we're concerned, the world could be asleep the entire year, so there's no real difference between that and Rosh Hashanah night, the way we see the world, so to speak, right? Why? Because we are limited in our perception.
Because we're limited, we can't see beyond
the pneumius.
We can't see beyond the outer shell.
Exactly. We see the outer shell on all year round, so we see the outer shell on Rosh Hashanah night.
But we never see.
But someone who sees the inner dimension comes Rosh Hashanah night, sees something completely different.
He was at high level.
They once asked. That's it, exactly. So this is the manifestation of the retraction. They once asked the Rebbetzin Chaim Mushke, the Rebbe's Rebbetzin, during the time when the Rebbe had his heart attack, and they wanted him to go to the hospital. The Rebbe refused, and so on. So they turned to the Rebbe and said, "Is your husband afraid to go to the hospital?" She said, "My husband is afraid of nothing. He's afraid of Rosh Hashanah." Anyway, so this is the idea. This is the concept that the Rebbe is developing over here. Continue Mitzvah Shem on Monday. Good job.